Hello, welcome to another edition of Book Reviews. My name is Shahida Rahman. My guest today is Ahmed Masoud. He's a Palestinian writer, director and academic. He's the author of Vanished, The Mysterious Disappearance of Mustafa Ouda. And I'd like to welcome Masoud to the studio today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your background? I know you've got a lot of credits with theatre and writing, and can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. So my name is Ahmed Masoud, as you said.
Yes.
I grew up in the Gaza Strip in Palestine, and I moved to London in 2002 to complete my postgraduate studies in English literature. Since then, I've been writing, I've been researching, I've been working, I've been doing a lot of things. But in 2005 specifically, I started a theatre group, or dance theatre group, which was called Al Zaytuna Dance Theatre. Mm-hmm. And from then, really, I did a lot of productions, both within dance and also traditional theatre. I've done a couple of plays, one for the BBC Radio 4 play in 2009, and was aired or broadcast in 2011 in the end. And I also did a play called Go to Gaza, Drink the Sea in 2009, which went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. The play was a response to the assault and the war on Gaza in 2009. Right. And it was a quick response that we put together, myself and some creative team. And more recently, I did a few other plays. One was called The Shroud Maker, which was staged at Amnesty International last November 2015. And also the same year, in June 2015, I published my first novel, Vanished.
Okay, yes, that's quite impressive. I mean, are they sort of based on your personal experiences? I mean, what you've seen out there in Gaza. Did that sort of prompt you to write stories based on your experiences?
That's right, quite a lot of them are. They're stories and experiences that I lived myself, but also the latest ones have been about stories that I know through friends and family. Right. All my family are still there. I have a huge family. I've got 3 brothers and 5 sisters. All of them are there, plus my parents, plus my many cousins.
I see.
So it's a huge family. And obviously, when Gaza is being attacked and bombarded, because it's such a small strip, it affects everybody, and everybody has a story to tell. So it's really my way of telling the story of my people and my country to the West is through theatre and writing.
Yes, I mean, what kind of response have you had from your own people as well as an audience here?
Well, it's been good. The only issue is that most of the stuff that I write or produce are in English, and they can't speak English, unfortunately. So there's a great photo of my parents holding the book like that and just shaking hands and really happy, and I put it on Twitter. But the problem is they don't know, they can't read. They don't even know what the story is. I mean, I've told them the plot and the story, but they can't really, they wouldn't read it because English is not their first language.
Of course. And I noticed on your website you got a description saying rewriting the self. Can you elaborate on that? I found that quite intriguing, actually.
Yes, it's about how we present ourselves as Palestinians. I think traditionally there has been a little bit of victimhood writing, which we are. We are victims of occupation and oppression and colonialism. However, I think there's also room for rewriting that sort of narrative a little bit to become a global position, the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian cause, if you like, more of a global issue and more of a global human story, because the stuff that we go through, they're not just specific to Palestinians, they're actually quite global. Any mother would go through the same pain if she loses her child. Any father would go through the same thing if they lose a child, and vice versa. So it's really my attempt is to kind of globalize the Palestinian cause, give it a human aspect, a human perspective that everybody relates to.
Yes, and that leads me to your published debut novel. It's fictional, isn't it?
That's right. Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the story?
Yes, so it's called Vanished, The Mysterious Disappearance of Mustafa Ouda. Vanished is a fictional story set in Gaza between 1981 and 2011. It follows the story of a young boy called Omar, who at the age of 8 decides to look for his father, his missing father. So since he was 8 years old. Up to that age, his mother and his uncle and his neighbor all told him the same version of the events of how his father disappeared. But it never made sense to him why his father would disappear like that. Was he killed? Did he run away? Did he not want to have the responsibility? What happened to him exactly? And also the other thing that puzzled him was the fact that the version that he was told was completely identical, coming from his mother, his uncle, and his neighbor. So he decides to become a detective himself and to go on a journey to find his father. So that was his biggest mistake. And he enlists his best friend Ahmed to become his sidekick. And they both go on the journey. And things happen. And I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil. I don't want to give too much away at this stage. But
I mean, would you say it's a kind of story that a typical Palestinian boy would probably go through? Is that how you sort of wrote that? Maybe a child who lost their father through different circumstances.
Yes, some of the events that the boy goes through. So, for example, the boy needs information. Nobody's giving him information, so he knows that the only people who can give him information are the Israeli soldiers. So he goes to the Israeli military commander and asks to see him and asks for information about his father. And that turns out to be the biggest mistake of his life, because things unfold differently from there, and he can't go back after he walks into the military station in there. It's a story that is not typical to every Palestinian child, but is familiar to every Palestinian child in the way that we deal with occupation, in the way we face occupation on a daily basis, checkpoints, and being constantly followed and harassed by soldiers and military occupation is something that any Palestinian child is very familiar with.
Yes, absolutely. And do you go back at all to see your family?
Yes, when the border is open. Unfortunately, most of the time the border is not open, because as Palestinians from Gaza, we don't have an airport. We can only use the Rafah airport, which is with Egypt. So we have to cross into Egypt and then go to Cairo and fly from Cairo. So since 2013, I haven't been able to go back because the border hasn't been opening much. It's only been opening for a few periods, like 3 days or 5 days, but that's about it. And then it shuts again. And I have my job here, and I can't risk it really. And I have my family and my children.
Absolutely.
And I can't be there, stuck there for a long time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you must worry about your family over there. I mean, it's an everyday sort of struggle for any Palestinian over there. I mean, how does that? You say through your writing, that is your bringing out that story. I mean, do you wish to continue that through other stories? Is that your primary aim, just to sort of tell your story through?
Yes, I think I want to focus more on the human story, on the fact that we are no different from anyone in the world. So my last play was called The Shroud Maker, and it was a black comedy set in Gaza. It was about an 80-year-old woman who was selling shrouds, the white shrouds for the dead. So for her, the whole conflict and the whole war zone was actually good business. She managed to make business out of it, so she was selling more. So the more people Israel killed, the more money she made. So it was brilliant for her. However, what I was trying to do in there, yes, it was comedy, and yes, it was almost like a stand-up comedy, but what I was trying to do is to kind of give it a human touch. It's the fact that actually, yes, we are different people. Everybody responds to this occupation differently. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. Everybody is crying and everybody is, depressed and everybody is in need. No, there are some people who are trying at least to make the most out of it and trying to make a business out of it. And you know what? It's fine, because... yes, it is vile in a way to see somebody making money out of a human tragedy. That is a general rule, but in that case, in that woman, that's her only way of survival. That's the only way of survival. It's not that she does it because she's an arms trader or something and she wants to make money out of the human tragedy. No, it's just her only way of survival. She can't do anything else, There are no state pensions, there is no NHS, there is nothing in there for her to support her, so that she has to find a way of making a living. So through these stories, I try to highlight the human survival, how people survive
Yes.
in situations like that. And I try to leave it to the audience and to the readers to kind of ask the questions, but why is it like that? I don't ask these questions myself. I just tell you what it is.
Yes,
And I
yes.
leave it to the readers to ask the questions. Why is it like that? Why is an 80-year-old woman can't have another income? She doesn't have a family. What happened to her family?
Yes,
And
yes.
then you dig into the family, and
Of
you find
course,
out that
yes.
in the Nakba in 1948, when the state of Israel was established, she was kicked out of her village, her family was killed. All of that background story will come out the moment you ask question. But I
see,
try to
yes.
avoid going into the historical context and
Yes,
trying to
yes,
give you a
yes.
documentary
Of course,
sort
yes.
of lesson in a way.
Absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting that you can add comedy and humour to a really serious issue with the suffering and the difficulties that the Palestinians face.
I try.
So I think, I think that's a different way of sort of putting it, really.
Yes,
You can have a laugh about it, but then again, you have the serious issues on the side.
That's right.
And, what kind of feedback have you had from people who have actually read your novel?
Well, quite a lot of people who are from Gaza, who are based in the UK and in London, a lot of them really liked it for one main reason, which is that it really reminded them of the place itself. They felt that they took a plane back to Gaza, and they just went back for a short period as they were reading the pages, because a lot of people commented on the fact that the actual description of the place is really good, the sense of the place is really good, the smells, etc. And in fact, it was one of my aims to do in this novel, so I'm glad to see that I was successful in it. I wanted to take people into a journey to Gaza, knowing how difficult it is for anybody, including me, to go to Gaza. So I thought the names are very important, the names of places, of streets, the smells, the colors, all of these are described into the book in here, and a lot of my Palestinian friends found that really, really interesting and very successful as well. For non-Palestinian friends or non-Palestinian readers, they also found that refreshing, because there aren't many works that have that sort of detailed description of the place itself and giving an identity to the place. One of my friends said, actually, it sounded like a holiday destination that I would go to, and that's nice to hear, that actually, again, as part of normalizing this human suffering, it's also, the place is also normal. It's not that the darkest place in hell or whatever.
Yes, I mean that's a difficult thing, to see it as normal, where what we've seen, is victims and the suffering and the difficulties people face. So I think, again, to be able to see that as normal,
that's right.
Through a book as well. So I think that's an amazing sort of way of writing that kind of story. So I think that's fantastic, and I'll have to read it. I have to read that. So I just wanted to ask, who's your favourite author? Who has particularly inspired you? Perhaps through your writing, even.
I have many, and they range and they're different in styles, etc. I like Graham Swift. I like his style. He's a really talented writer, and I think the literature in his works is amazing. The writing is brilliant. But with this book specifically, actually, the main influence, I would say, there's a Spanish writer called Carlos Zafun, who wrote The Shadow of the Wind, which is set in Barcelona. And it's a book about a book, almost. It's about a boy who finds a book, and there's a guy or a man who's trying to steal that book from him and destroy it. That's the premise of the book. But then it takes you through Spain in the Civil War, takes you through the place very well, and I think it influenced my writing a little bit, because I really liked kind of traveling to the place through a book, and I wanted to do the same with my book as well.
You can sort of relate to that as well.
That's right, and the idea, the sort of coming of age story as well, so the innocence kind of changing as you go through different experiences, and you're coming to realize the world and how beautiful and ugly at the same time is. I found that quite fascinating, so I wanted to create not something like it, because I had actually written the first draft by the time I read that book. I wanted to write something not very similar, but kind of does the same, in the sense it's a coming of age story set in very, very difficult circumstances. I mean, how do you actually perceive that? How do you go through teenagehood while you're going through military occupation at the same
Yes,
time,
yes.
trying to find your father, some other stuff happening which I can't describe at
Yes.
the moment.
No, that's good, that's
But
good.
how do you deal with all of these things
Yes,
at the same
yes.
time? Noticing girls for the first time
Yes,
is
yes.
also is good because it's a distraction from the realities, the
Yes,
harsh realities,
yes.
but it's also frightening at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fascinating. And apart from your writing, what do you like to do in your spare time? Do you have any hobbies at all?
Yes, a lot. I have to spend a lot of time with my children. I'd like to spend a lot of time with my children.
That's nice,
I'd like to go
yeah.
swimming with my
Oh, that's
son. Yeah,
good.
Zenedine, or Zeno as we call him.
Oh,
He's
okay, yes.
he's a very good swimmer, and I like to go swimming with him.
I mean, are they chuffed that, oh, Daddy's a writer? You know,
Oh, they are a lot. Yes, he does. He does mention that a
Good.
lot. He wants to write his own
Oh, he
novel. He
does,
wants to become a
okay.
writer as well. In fact, he has written a draft of something, so he wants to publish it. So, which is
Fantastic,
great.
fantastic. I mean, does he realise about the difficulties the Palestinians are facing at the moment?
Yes,
Does he
yes, he
understand
does
that?
a lot because
Yeah.
we've been to Gaza together
Oh, yeah.
twice. I mean, he's 6.5 years old now,
see.
but he's been to Gaza twice. But more recently, he's asking, "Why can't we go?" And I'm saying, "Because the border is shut."
Yes, yes.
And then he's asking questions about that, and I try not to, make it sound really horrible.
Yes,
just
yes.
to tell it as it is. Well, we can't because the border is
Yes,
shut, and
yes,
we
yes.
have to wait, etc.
Yeah.
But for him, it was great when he went because, again, it was that holiday destination. He's a little boy. He's spoiled by the big family. The weather was nice. It's by the beach, by the Mediterranean.
course,
The food
yes.
is lovely, So
Yes.
he had a blast in there, and he misses it a lot.
Absolutely,
He wants to
yes.
go, but unfortunately, it's very difficult at the moment.
No, that's absolutely fascinating to hear. And do you have a top publishing tip for those authors out there who want to be able to become published authors? I mean, what would be your number one tip, would you say?
I think don't write for publishing. I think just write,
Yes,
just
yes.
write, because these days you can publish, you can get your work out there without the help of publishers.
Yes, yes.
And I feel that in order to get published, you have to have something to work with to start with. You have to go
yes.
through the process. So don't give up if you get rejections. It's fine.
Yes, we all do. We all do
exactly.
that.
Yes, I
Yes.
think I have many times, and that's
Yes.
okay. Eventually it will be published in whatever means you choose to have. But I think writing for me is I write a lot, and quite a lot of what I've written hasn't been published, which is fine. I think I write it for
Okay,
myself
yes.
sometimes. I don't actually want anybody to read it
Oh,
because
yes,
it's very personal to me, and it's very cathartic to do. There's something beautiful about writing, which is giving you that your own world, your own space, your own temple,
Of course,
in a
yes.
way.
But
just
maybe
to-
this time next year you might decide, I want
Yes.
people to read it. So it really depends on your mood and how you're feeling.
Yes, exactly.
Your mood actually comes through the writing. So
Oh, when you
that's-
become famous, everything will be publishable.
Right, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so, do you have a website? Would you like to tell our viewers about your website?
Yes, it's not a very good website at the moment. It needs a lot of update, but it is basically my name, Ahmed Masoud, all one word, .co.uk. That's it. Yeah, I'm updating it at the moment, so hopefully I'll have a better version.
Okay, and have you got another book coming out?
I'm writing another book. Yes,
Okay.
I'm in discussion with some publishers, but
good.
I haven't finished it yet. But
It's coming.
we'll see. It's coming. It's coming along.
Fantastic,
Yes,
fantastic.
yes.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you very much for telling us about your book. Before we finish the show, would you like to read a page from your book?
Sure, I would love to.
Okay.
So I'll read from chapter 2. I'll read a page. My father was gone. I was too young to understand why, and nobody was able to explain it to me, not even my mother. When I asked, she would always give me a sad smile, unlike her usual watermelon grin. I hated it when she did that. It frightened me. There was danger in that smile which I could not understand, a hidden story that I was desperate to uncover. But she never told me, despite my desperate attempts to make her talk. Perhaps this is what pushed me to proclaim myself the youngest detective in the Jabalia camp at the age of 8. I learned not to talk about my father. Sometimes I missed him so much it hurt, almost as if I had nails running through my heart. However hard Mum tried to make it better for me, there was a hole in the middle of the family where Dad should have been, an empty space whenever we sat down to eat, a place that couldn't be filled by anyone else. Everybody had a father except me, and it hurt. But nobody wanted to know. No one listened when I tried to explain how much I missed him. But for one last time, I wanted to hear the scripted story from her so I could take it from there. Although I was 8 years of age, there was so much destruction around me, it forced me to grow up much faster. Or maybe I believe I did.
Thank you very much. That's a lovely piece, and I really look forward to reading it. So,
Thank you.
And thank you for coming to the show today and telling us about your stories.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you
you
so much.
I'd like to end the show with a quote. If I waited till I felt like writing, I wouldn't write at all, and that's by Anne Tyler. So I'd like to thank my guest today, Ahmed Masoud. Until next time, goodbye.